Questions left, and only we've got around 15 minutes for questions, then we'll go back to the panelists for some summing up speeches. And so to take a couple of questions now. The first one from Ruth, and then there's one from O'Shane, I think is the name, if I've read it properly. So brief. Keep it as brief as you can, please.
Sorry.
I think it will help the candidates if they have a copy of this. Okay, I'm from Fuel Poverty Action.
Excuse me, sorry, I was just about to pitch my question. Sorry, I just wanted to...
Sorry, we're doing it through the chair.
Oh, sorry, Ruth, and then over to you. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, can we take Ruth first, and then we'll come to you?
Okay, no problem, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, apologies.
I'm from Fuel Poverty Action, and I wanted to ask the candidates, will they and their party support Fuel Poverty Action's Energy Bill of Rights? Do you have a copy? There's copies at the back. But the first right is that we all have the right to affordable energy to meet our basic needs. Everyone should be able to cook food and keep warm when it's cold. And the second is, we all have the right to energy that does not harm us, the environment, or the climate. This means shifting from fossil fuels and nuclear power to renewable energy from the sun, wind, and waves. And it also means no fracking. And the final right is that we all have the right to properly insulated, well-repaired housing that does not waste energy. Now, 81 sitting MPs have signed an EDM, an early day motion in support of the Energy Bill of Rights, and that's from 9 parties and independents, all parties. And the background to this is that it's anticipated that 12,000 people may die this winter because they can't afford to heat their homes. And Brent in particular has very high levels of poverty and a lot of private rented accommodation. People get into debt to these energy companies with the outrageous prices, and then they get put on a prepayment meter where you actually pay a higher rate than your neighbors who are on direct debit. And people are forced to have these meters installed, including by people breaking into their homes. So the concrete things, the concrete questions are against fracking, that's been covered, opposing prepayment meters and the higher prices that are charged for them, and also for mass insulation, street by street insulation, because we lose a third of our heat goes out through the walls and windows, and the policies that the government has instituted in no way meet the need for insulation.
Thank you. And O'Shane?
Yes, sorry.
Thanks.
You're right. I'm O'Shane and I'm a London Borough of Brent resident, and I really care about my community, and I just wanted to find out why should I vote for you guys, you know, why should I vote for you if, you know, what can you, if I care about my community, my vote, voting for you, what does my vote mean to you?
Okay, thank you. So, fuel poverty and what you're going to do for
Well, on the fuel poverty side, I've only just seen this, so thank you for giving this to us today, but the government has a whole fuel poverty strategy that was put into place just in March 2015, announced just already, and the idea is very much to shift again fuel poverty homes from the lower bands up. We want to see that happen. That's been announced already, and it's going to continue. And I think I would like to look at this document you give me in connection with that declared strategy. And of course, the government's also expended considerable money on the Green Deal, which deals precisely what you're saying on insulation. Absolutely on insulation. Well, it does. If you look at the what's offered, households, I've got the figures here, in fact. So if you look at the Green Deal, you can claim up to £3,750 for solid wall insulation, as well as £1,250 for 2 other measures from an approved list. That only comes back on savings on your energy bill. So it absolutely is the case that insulation is covered, and this government's taking very, very seriously what's been raised in terms of insulation, energy loss in that way, and making new homes much, much, much more energy efficient. And moving, well, but it has been pushed through. It has been. The Green Deal exists. People have been taking money already from that. So that's the key point. As to your question, sir, about why your vote matters. Well, your vote matters firstly because you live here, you live in your community, you're an active part of it, you're a member of our society. So your vote absolutely counts. I want your vote because of that factor. I want to support this community in its actions, consultatively, looking at what we do locally, fighting for key issues such as no fracking in Brent, as we've just discussed here tonight, And I want to hear from you what's important to you. That's important. What's important to you is important to me. And if I was your MP, that is my hallmark, and I would open my door to you, and I'd want to have a discussion and have that one-to-one and hear from you as to your thoughts on that.
Thank you. Ollie?
Sure. So I'm not a candidate, so I won't answer that second question. On the fuel poverty question, as I said at the beginning, the rate of insulation of our housing stock of the last government has declined by 60%, which is, it's just appalling. It's appalling, and we have the worst housing stock in Europe. There was a report that went to The Guardian last week showing that Sweden, where winter temperatures are typically on average 4 degrees lower, have a far lower number of people admitted to hospital with respiratory illnesses, which are typically made worse by living in cold homes. It's a national scandal, the extent of our leaky homes, and the Green Deal, sadly, has massively failed. It's massively failed. It is, the number of people taking out measures is slowly increasing, but it's so complicated, and it's not the right solution. I mean, essentially, it's saying if you take up this measure through with quite high interest rates on your loans, you will pay that back through the savings you make on your energy bills, as long as then it never goes above, and it's all hideously complicated. What we need is 1 million homes insulated every year, this year until 2020, as a minimum, insulated up to energy performance level band C, which is what is considered a healthy level of insulation. And that allows children to concentrate on their homeworks, it allows asthma sufferers to get a bit of relief, and it is way, way beyond anything which the Green Deal is sadly pointing us towards at the moment.
Ruth, thank you for your question. The Green Deal has failed, and as Ollie was saying, the high interest rates and hidden charges meant that many households would have ended up paying more than they actually saved, and that's a fact. I want to just quickly run through Labour's record. Remember, the Warm Front helped over 2 million households, and it was actually very successful. And we launched the Boyle scrappage scheme in 2009 as well, and that was really successful. And if that had kept going, we would have seen many more people would have had improved housing and warmer homes over the last 5 years. Ruth, you've touched on something that's really quite important to me. I sit as a magistrate, and they send warrants to us. So we sit as a magistrate. You get a warrant where they ask if they can get permission to go into somebody's house and install a payment meter. And it's normally if the debt is over £150. And I often refuse to sign those warrants because I feel so uncomfortable about doing that. And it's one of my biggest bugbears that you would break into somebody's house and install a pay meter, which means that they'll never be able to pay off their debt anyway. So I would like to tackle that particular issue in regards to payment meters, but I need help to do that. And it's something that I've been thinking about for quite a while, and I'd like to work with you to do that, and I'd like to work with anybody that wants to work with me to make sure that we can abolish that. It should be cheaper, actually, to have a payment meter than it is to have a direct debit, because there's no cost to the company once it's installed, so it should actually be cheaper. So it doesn't actually make any sense. So I really want to work on that. It's one of my pet hates, and it's heartbreaking, the number of warrants that come through the courts. O'Shane, what does your vote mean to me? If we don't have a Labour MP in Brent, we will have a Conservative government. And that to me is frightening, to think that we will have another 5 years of what we've just gone through. And so, I'm really passionate about I'm passionate about green issues. I don't know enough about it, to be honest. Shahrar knows way more than I do, and I hope that I am elected, but I hope that we can work together, because I just think it's really important. Now, things are just too serious for us to be too partisan all the time. We have to work together with people, like-minded people, to make sure we get the best for our country, and the best for people who can least afford to live in a cold home, can least afford to call 999 and have an ambulance take an hour to get to them. And I just think it's important that we work with like-minded people so that we have a government that's for the many and not for the few.
Just also coming to the this energy bill of rights. Unequivocally, my answer to the question is yes, and I'll tell you why. Based also on my daily working experience, I've been working with some of the most vulnerable people in society for the last 20 years, and I'm faced on a daily basis with clients who are making a choice between whether they heat their home or whether they eat. And sometimes they can afford to do neither. So they will be waiting until their next benefit check before they can actually have a meal. So for me, I find that frankly horrendous to be living in a supposedly civilized country that actually tolerates some of the poorest people in the land living in absolute poverty. So I completely endorse all the points here without reservation. Coming to the gentleman at the back, I just also want to respond to that by saying my taking a slightly broader view and not just concentrating on the green issues, my answer would be that I'm completely responsible for representing you both in the community but also in Parliament, and taking your question broadly, all the constituents in Brent, whatever their needs may be, whether they be green, whether they be legal, whether they be financial, whether they be in a benefit problem, whatever the case may be, it's my responsibility to represent you tooth and nail in Parliament, and that would be my ambition. I would make myself also, all other professional bodies, lawyers, social workers, nurses, they all have licensing and professional codes of conduct, and my view is that politicians should be accountable to you in just the same way, and we should, if you're not satisfied with us, you should be able to recall us, whoever we are, whatever political party we represent. We should all be subject to recall, and you should be able to get rid of us if you're not happy with what we deliver. But my hope would be, if elected, to make sure that I meet all the needs of the people here in Brent. Thank you.
I thought that was some applause starting up, but it was loose change. Sorry about that. Thanks very much for your aptly named Energy Bill of Rights. Heating is a rights issue, it's an entitlement, it's a basic need, as is a roof over your heads. And it is a disaster what we've seen successive governments do to our access to those basic needs in terms of selling off energy. Even the energy which we should be changing from to renewable sources has been sold off. So essentially you have that control, often from foreign multinational companies, coming right into your living room, to the extent that you're right, people are barging their way in and installing a meter to increase their control over your daily life and to make it even more unaffordable for you. The Green Party would reverse that situation wholesale. We believe in micro-generation. We want streets to have power over their own power generation. And guess what? They might generate more than they need themselves, and they can sell it back into the national grid. They can get some money back for it. Alan's so-called Green Deal is nothing worthy of the name. It's hopelessly complicated, as already been explained. It is a situation where the capitalist is winner, the capitalist is king. What we've done in Kirklees Council, for example, we've had green representation. We've rolled out 10,000 free energy installation. We've dealt with the negotiation outside, and we've said that this is not just about your ability to pay for it, and through debt finance, we don't want anything to do with that. We're saying that this is a win-win, not just for you, but guess what, for the planet, because the economy is never costing anything according to the planet. In terms of why you or anybody should vote for me, I want you to vote for what you believe in. And make no mistake, and Dawn may want to present it as her being the lead candidate. The last time I heard somebody talking about themselves, I'm not saying you're arrogant, but arrogantly presuming that they were going to get in office, they're not even at the table today. So you should vote for somebody who you believe in. And if I had a vote for every person who said I'd vote Green if I thought you could win, guess what? We would win. Our policies are the most popular on the national website. Not because we're just telling people what we think they want to hear, it's because we believe in that and they happen to be the right policies. And we're not a pressure group, we're a political party. We're standing because we mean business. And we need to get in there. And if there's one thing you learn about politicians, they can't just borrow people's and pluck them out and plagiarise people's policies. What have you heard here tonight? They can't do that because they don't believe in it. And so it will unravel slowly that they really don't believe in that agenda. You need people who believe in that agenda because they've been talking about it, explaining it, thinking about it, and actually living it, and trying to actually implement it. So I want you, if it's me, fine. I want you to vote for what you believe in, whoever you vote for, and you know you want to be voting for politicians who know the difference between right and wrong. They're not going to be trying to accept backhanders or fundraising under the radar, spread it out over different years. You want people, not just because they think they're going to be found out, because they know the difference between right and wrong. I want to live in a Brent where school children aren't held back from boarding a bus by police who are instigating racial profiling. I want to live in a Brent where that person comes on the bus and I've asked him, and he says it's because he's black, he shouldn't be resigned to that. I want to live in a borough where you're not scrapping half of the borough's libraries, and that's systematically preventing school children from using computers and people from actually investigating their life chances and exploring job opportunities. That's the kind of Brent that I don't want to live in. I have a vision about Brent, and I have the values I hope that will match it.
Okay, thanks. We've probably got time for one more round of questions, so I just wanted to open up and see if there's maybe three more questions. If you try and keep it brief, put your hands up. Okay, so the lady there.
Yes, it's a bit different. The United Nations has reported that industrialised farming, particularly our dependence on farmed animals, is hugely damaging to the environment. What would your parties do to move towards more sustainable food production?
Okay, and any more?
Hi, I'm Alan Wheatley. I'm from Kilburn Unemployed Workers Group, which combines Camden and Brent. It seems that there are vast buildings going up here and there that are taking over the borough and the land, and they're largely owned by offshore landlords and the like. What sort of impact does that have on people's mental health here in an area of poverty, and what would you do about it?
And one more question from someone who hasn't asked one already. Yeah.
This is a bit of a general question. I'd like to address this to all the panel, and particularly the UKIP member as well. What's your opinion? Are you in favour or justified what the BBC panel did in getting rid of Jeremy Clarkson? Considering the words he's been using and the terminology he's been using. And also, I would like to point to you that this is one of the greatest boroughs to live in. We had two MPs here that made a fantastic impact on this borough, Paul Boateng and Ken Livingston. And I'd also like to know, what are you going to offer us, candidate? If we elect you tomorrow, what are your policies for us? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So a question on industrialised farming and the impacts of buildings going up on health, and what you're going to do for the community, and like not to the remit of the tonight's event, but something a question on Jeremy Clarkson. Choose if you want to answer that. If I start this end.
Fantastic question about industrial food production. And actually, although I heard some complacency earlier about branding me as somebody who wants to institute farms, it's not such a stupid idea to restore a bit of that balance. Because at the moment, we don't have, as a capital, food resilience. And whether or not there's an oil blockade or there's a strike, people will suddenly realise they've got no food in the supermarkets. And one of the great things I've seen in Brent is the transition town movement. And it stops and starts, and we've got to revive it. We've got to make sure that we're doing that, because we're building resilience. And when we've got local farmers markets as well, you will understand where that food is coming from, and you'll have a better connection with it. We've got allotments like where there's waiting lists like there's no tomorrow. We want to introduce and educate school children into growing their own food and having and eating healthier food. We need to move away from industrialised food agriculture. One of the things that none of the other political parties talk about, or hardly ever, it's not on their radar, is animal welfare. The way in which we treat animals is shocking. And it's been decades since we've gone into the abattoirs and seen it, and it's still persisting. Whether it's in the rearing of these animals, whether it's in the transportation of them or in the slaughter of them, we need to make sure that we're treating our fellow non-human animals in a decent way. We need to start eating less meat, because if you're able to offer that vegetation wholesale to people, they would eat it. People around the world, they would have enough to eat instead of giving it into fattening. In terms of land deals, people actually buying up properties. I mean, this is one of the biggest issues of our time, housing crisis, as we know. The way in which the social housing has been systematically denuded. We've got situations also in our own West Hendon, where we've got barracks have actually, sealed the deal with the local council, and they're just being able to build on a site of special scientific interest. And with presumably whatever unaffordable housing there is, will have a poor door associated with it. Mental health is a problem. It's becoming more of a problem because we've got the poorest in society are being penalised most by the austerity agenda. And it's affecting their health, whether or not they're able to actually go and sign on to job seekers allowance. They're being marginalised, prevented, penalised for all kinds of fickle reasons. So mental health is a big problem in terms of people actually being turfed out due to the bedroom tax. Maybe they had that spare bedroom simply because they had somebody from social care, which has also been actually eroded, coming on a weekly basis. They're no longer able to have that care somebody in their house because of the bedroom tax. People being turfed out in Brent. How inhumane is that? School children as well, having to be sent somewhere else outside, miles away. In terms of Jeremy Clarkson, well, as one of the reactions of the audience may have, I think I agree with. I don't think it's the most important question of our time. I think it's a good idea for him to move on in terms of the public sector broadcasting element of it. I think we shouldn't be paying such massive salaries to people for doing fairly, easy jobs. I think we need to have a far better pay ratio, and there is no place in the workplace for that kind of intimidation or bullying. So if he's been caught out for once, and in spite of all the popular pressure, I think it's a good decision.
Coming to the first question about the industrial food production, UKIP plans to leave the Common Agricultural Policy and also move away from the excessive regulation of the EU in all areas of our domestic life, including agriculture, fisheries, rural affairs. And so that would, we believe, have a positive impact on agriculture and on processes, and also on protecting our farmers and protecting our fishery industry as well. So I think that's important to defend that to the maximum. Coming to the second question about housing, I think, again, having worked many, many years in mental health, that is absolutely clear as day. The basic bedrock of our well-being is the housing that we live in, and I think it is fundamentally wrong again if landlords are allowed to exploit some of the most vulnerable people in our community. I think that's just needs to be regulated, and that needs to be tackled very fiercely. Also, I think that in London in particular, it's again something that everybody wants to have the ability to choose to buy their own home. And again, it's a very complicated problem. However, I would be dedicated to trying to have more affordable housing, to find schemes so that people can buy their own homes, be it that the council help them to do that, or housing associations help them to do that, and explore different ways to tackle housing and make it much more available for people. The final question about Jeremy Clarkson, I think he's had a very long, many lives in terms of still being on the scene, and I agree that finally it's absolutely right that he actually no longer can continue in his role, because anybody who goes about battering a producer in the way that he did, I think anybody else in a normal walk of life would immediately be hauled in front of the courts and would have to be answerable to their actions, and I don't see that Jeremy Clarkson should be treated any differently to any other member of the community. Coming to the very final question, what I would hope to bring to you if elected as your MP, it would be total and utter dedication to your needs. It would be complete integrity, because I've come into this to make a difference. Having spent 20 years in mental health, that's my background, to try and work and defend and represent ordinary people, and to serve you from every day that I'm able to. Thank you.
Okay, so let's tackle Jeremy Clarkson first. First of all, I rolled my eyes when you asked that question, but I think you may be referring to his racist comments as well. And basically, he needs to go. You know, he's just a man. He's not God. He's just a man. He's on a TV show. He runs a program. He needs to go. He's racist. He's sexist. He's a bully. Sounds like some of the politicians I know, but you know, basically, he needs to go. So that's my opinion on that. You talked about the buildings and misused buildings. Well, we've got, every time I go home, I go past the North Circular, and we've got those 2 twin buildings that are owned by somebody overseas, and basically it needs to be built on, it needs to be made into affordable housing if we can do that and get that done. If it needs to be reclaimed, then it should be reclaimed, because we need more affordable housing and social housing in Brent. I went to see a scheme in Park Royal the other day, and I think that all buildings that we have in Brent needs to have solar paneling, it needs to have brown roofs and green roofs, and it needs to be energy efficient and carbon neutral, and I think that's important with any new build. That's currently what's going on in Park Royal. We need to encourage that, make sure more of that happens. In regards to sustainable farming, first of all, we need to stop wasting food. We waste way too much food as a society, so we need to stop wasting food. There's lots of initiatives that are going on, like the Wilson harvesters that go around and harvest people's fruits and things off of trees and then sell those. And we need to encourage a bit more imagination like that, as well as encouraging sustainable farming. The Labour Party is committing to expanding the green banks and having green bonds and making sure that there's more green jobs. When the Labour Party left government, green jobs were increasing at 4 times the rate of the rest of the economy, which meant that if we kept investing in green jobs, more people will be in work, there'll be more housing, and the economy wouldn't have been in the state that it is at the moment. So green jobs are key to our economy. We will tackle rogue landlords. We will tackle rogue landlords. Bedroom tax will be abolished. We will freeze energy bills. We will campaign for solar panelling in churches, which is one of the programs, the church building programs. And I know Friends of the Earth want to have solar panelling in schools, which I think is also another great initiative and a great program, which I'll endorse and campaign. And lastly, in regards to, I'm not complacent, and I hope you haven't found me arrogant, because I'm not arrogant, I'm not complacent. Otherwise, I wouldn't have spoken to over 40,000 people in Brent, and as I say, I aim to speak to 45,000 people. It's important for me to go around and talk to people, because yes, I live in Brent, I want to represent Brent, and I want to make Brent better. And as I say, I sit as a magistrate. I have seen the damage that this coalition government has done to our people in Brent, and it is devastating and heartbreaking. When people come and sit before me in court having stolen shaving foam and a shaver because they're trying to get themselves ready for an interview, you think, what kind of society are we becoming? What kind of world are we living in where we've allowed this to happen? And that's the reason why I've been here. I've been campaigning since I was about 7 years old. I won't tell you about my school exploits, but I've been campaigning for a long time about injustice. And I tell you, one of the biggest injustices we've had has been this coalition government, and we have to get them out.
You know why the last 5 years have been so tough? It's because Dawn's party wrecked the economy in this country. It wrecked the economy in this country and made that we had to restore... Please, Dawn, I'm sorry, Dawn, I didn't interrupt you. I hope you'll allow me the courtesy of finishing my points. And I'm sorry to say that the reason we've had 5 years of tough times, which have now been righted if you look at the budget and where we are today, is because of the mess that they left us in terms of public debt. The deficit. Well, bankers. Yes, exactly, the bankers. The bankers that were welcomed in by Tony Blair and by Gordon Brown, by those people. The reason, sir, that offshore trusts have bought your property was because of her party. That's why they came in. This government introduced the massive whack of stamp duty that's made it very difficult for those people to buy things now in these countries outside of the country to buy things. So we have action on that, and I think we want to solve the housing issue. Here's a very important point. If there are buildings that are unoccupied, as Dawn said...
The party defines affordable housing as 85% of market rate.
I want social housing as well. I want more new housing, full stop. That's what we need in this country. And also, but that may, and here's a corollary, and again, I'm here to tell you... I mean, please, would you... I'd like to, answer your point, and we'll come into a conversation. I'd like to have a longer chat about this. But when it comes to the idea, for example, that we've talked about the housing crisis. We may have to consider that high density is an answer to some of the problems. If we want people to stay in Brent, we may have to accept that high density, not hideous high density, but things that work well for society and for our local infrastructure will come in. And that, I'm not necessarily, I don't think anyone's against necessarily tall buildings, full stop, but they have to be tall buildings that work with the environment, where there are proper facilities for people, and indeed that mental health is respected and looked at in that way. When we come to farming, industrialised farming, huge problem. This idea of how we are, again, the energy consumption side, it is a massive, massive problem. But I tell you, it's going to get worse, not in this country, but in China and other places where they're just starting on that journey. So what's the real solution here? What is it? Once again, I think we live in a golden age at the moment. That golden age is technology. What is happening, transforming the world in terms of renewables, in terms of what's happening, and renewable meat substances are the next phase of this. I refer you to a fascinating article. It was either in last week's Economist or the week before. Look at this article. What you will get with that article is an example of where we will go with meat production in the future. It won't be meat, it will be renewable meat that tastes better than meat in that way. If we can do it in other areas, why can't we do it in that area too? I say we can, and that I think will be the solution to that particular problem, and it's one that I endorse. And finally, Jeremy Clarkson, you've said enough, I agree with what everyone said on that point. And when it comes down to policies for community, it all comes back to this. It all comes back again to having the economy in place that enables us to make the decisions for our community from a position of strength rather than weakness. With a weak economy, you get nothing, you get chaos, and you get the country on the verge of ruin, which is where Labour took us.
We're running out of time, so this